I only model bolts once in my life, right? And it's
Yeah.
just like I wanted to model the bolts the way I wanted to make them right and use it for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
So I have a bolt scene where like every time I work into something, it's just like, okay, I'll bring the bolts and start placing the bolts.
Yeah.
So I'm not wasting time there. I'm
Yeah.
reusing the
Bolts
stuff.
never change.
Bolts never change. This is the slogan for Fallout 5.
Yeah.
So my name is Ayi Sanchez, and I am originally from Spain, from Canary Islands. And I've been working in games now since 2010, more or less. And been working first in Spain, where I started. Like I have a background in journalism. So originally I did study journalism back in Madrid in Spain. And then I end up like getting into, I always knew that I kind of like PCs, graphics, and stuff like that, but I never found the time to actually jump into that. And I knew that I like editing as well. So I end up like working small jobs as a journalist, like writing in magazines. I work on TV for a while, for like a couple of years, and I end up like getting to a small like TV production company that was doing like a hunting TV channel.
Okay.
And with in there, it was like very small. My role was like multiple. I was like a cameraman. I was
Mhm.
editing, and I end up myself doing a lot of the motion graphics for the
Okay.
TV channel because nobody else was doing it. And since it was like a very kind of cheap channel, it was like, oh,
Yeah.
I think I can do that. I can do it actually. So I end up like doing some tests at home because I was really into After Effects as well.
Okay.
I was watching those old videos from Video Copilot. I don't know if
Oh
you
yeah.
remember those.
What's up, guys?
Yeah, what's
Andrew
up, guy?
Kramer here.
Exactly.
Hey, what's up? Andrew Kramer here, and I've got a tutorial that's gonna knock your socks off. Literally, knock them off. Even if you got sandals on, just knock them right off.
And I always thought like, wow, this must be amazing, like to do like the motion graphics of
Mhm.
stuff. So I end up doing all the motion graphics with the channel.
Okay.
And I found myself, I remember like we had this TV show or program, whatever, that it was about cars. So we will go and like the brands will give us the car for like a couple of days. So we
Mhm.
could go around, film the car, do like a video review of the car. And that was like, it was mostly cars that were used for like going to hunting, right?
Okay.
Um, and we had like a small little section that it was like a shop. So we actually had to do like a shop introduction where we would sell like different products that it was another part of the company was actually selling.
Mhm.
Um, so it was pretty interesting to actually get to do the motion graphics for it because like I had to do a crate moving rotating in After Effects,
Uh-huh.
and it was like I had to animate 6 planes,
Yeah.
individually to spin. And I was like, man, there must be an easier way to do these for sure.
Mhm.
So I end up like doing in After Effects in that moment. But then I was like, okay, I need to lean. I need to actually learn 3D.
Yeah.
And a few months later, the channel wasn't doing very good. A bunch of us got laid off, and it
Mhm.
was the right time. I had some money, and it was like, okay, I'm gonna try to learn some 3D. So I went to a course. So it was like 6 months, and it was like an introduction to 3D modeling, animation, and post production. So I ended up doing it, and then while I was in studying, there was a guy there who had like a studio at home for like architectural visualization.
Mhm.
So I ended up working for him for like another year, and I learned a lot about like offline rendering and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But I always liked video games since I was a kid, and I found out because of friends of mine that Madrid had a studio, Mercury Steam, who was doing like Castlevania back then. And I
Yeah.
played the game, and I was quite impressed with like the quality of the game. So I decided to apply it. So I did the art test and then pass, and then I started working in games over there.
That's awesome.
And the beginning was like kind of very very small because it was like Castlevania Mirror of Fate. It was like a 3DS game. So it
Yeah,
was like,
I think I played that.
you played it? All right.
Yeah.
Well, I did most of the textures for that game.
Nice.
So it was only two of us doing the textures, and I got the job as a texture artist because, like, while studying, I realized like I really, really like enjoyed that process of doing textures.
Oh yeah, it's really cool.
And one thing led to another, and then like got moved to the bigger project, which was like the PlayStation 3 360 one. It was Lords of Shadows 2,
Mm-hmm.
and I learned quite a lot. Back in the day, it was like one of the only studios with like maybe Naughty Dog and some more that had like a fully dedicated texture art department. And there was a lot of people who knew a lot. It was like knowledge from like most of the people from that studio were coming from Pyro. Pyro is the studio that originally did Commandos, like the old strategy game back in the
Okay.
day.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of people with like a lot of knowledge. So I got to learn directly from them while I was doing the stuff. So it was great.
Yeah, it's really good to learn from people that actually know how to do things.
Yeah, because like especially back in the day, there was resources for sure,
Mhm.
but it wasn't as much as today. I think like nowadays you have infinite information everywhere. You know, like
Yeah.
from tutorials to mentorships to. I think that the market has evolved quite a lot, but
Yeah.
it was different back then. And in the job, usually you get to learn a lot. I would say
Mhm.
like probably 75% of what I know is I just learned it from the people that I work with.
Yeah.
Um, but when you're out of school, you think you know a lot. When in reality, you don't know much.
Oh, yeah.
Unfortunately,
Right. Like when you get out of school, you realize that you only learned how to open the book, basically.
pretty much first page.
Yeah. But your history of your career sounds somewhat similar to mine, oddly enough. A lot of the ways that my career has evolved sounds similar to what you're talking about. Realizing like the limitations of what you can do in After Effects and having that urge to go into 3D. I've been trying to like incorporate 3D into the workflows in the companies that I worked for. Sometimes I feel like it's just easier to
It's a time saver.
yeah, it's like it's it's right there. I just need to rotate something in 3 dimensions. I don't want to like have to rebuild a box out of six planes and make sure
Rotating.
they are aligned perfectly so there's not a
Yeah.
pixel hairline gap between them or whatever, like I just find it fascinating, and I love 3D. I've loved it for years, and yeah.
3D is amazing. Like you can dedicate your life to it, and it's funny when you find other people who get to the same point where it's like, yeah, this is what I like to do,
Yeah.
and I can get paid for it. So it's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So basically, like after that, um, same story again. I was a contractor. Contract ended, and then I was looking, like for new opportunities. So I didn't know what to do. I did a little bit of freelance, and then after a while, because like when I was a teenager, I had experience to actually move abroad with my parents. We moved very close to where we were living, but we moved to a different country, it was Portugal.
Hmm.
So I got the chance to actually work. No, sorry, not work. Leave in Portugal. My father went there for work, and I was in high school basically. But I really really liked the experience of living in a different country, getting to use and learn the language, and it's pretty nice to have that experience. So after Castlevania, I was like, okay, maybe it will be a good time to actually like move abroad, go somewhere else,
Hmm.
try the experience of like I never worked in English in my life,
Hmm.
so I was like, okay, let's try it out. So I end up like in the UK. I went there to a studio called Splash Damage,
Okay.
which is like it's very famous back in the day because like they did Brink, and I always was a big fan of like the art of the game,
Yeah.
and a lot of the artists that were working there. I think like that studio always had an amazing talent. Like for some reason, like they had a magnet for talent. I figured out why they had a magnet for talent later on, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I end up going there, and when they told me the project, it was like, oh, you're gonna come here if you sign the contract and get to work on Gears of War Ultimate Edition, which is like a remaster of the original Gears of War,
Mm-hmm.
which was a game that I actually know pretty well because I played it with my brother quite a lot.
Right.
Um, so I was excited. I was like, okay, do a remaster must be like an experience because it's basically the game is done. It's all about like making sure that the game feels actual in terms of graphics and art.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I moved over there. We we spent like I don't know like a year maybe uh, working on that game, and I had a super good experience with the UK living over there. Then after the project was done, we got moved because Microsoft, as past time I was working with Microsoft, so we got to work on Gears of War 4, and we were doing all the multiplayer stuff.
Okay.
So we end up. Um, sorry, can you hear
I
the
hear
outside?
something. It sounds like a
Yes,
motorcycle.
it's a motorcycle. Yeah, sorry, I have my window open.
That's
Maybe I
okay.
should.
No, don't worry about it.
So basically, like we end up like working for Gears of War 4, doing the multiplayer maps, and it was interesting because like we were doing the multiplayer maps remasters for like the original Gears too, and like it was really nice kind of thing to see like how you can like take an old level, understand how it was built. It's like archaeology trip in a way.
Yeah.
You will dig it out and you will remake it from scratch, basically. Um, but yeah, no, it was kind of like that, opening the levels, redoing the levels from scratch. Like let's say, like save the old level as a prefab that you will work on top. So you always have the guidelines for that. We
Mm-hmm.
will of course like do some work on the collisions. Like we had a bunch of level designers whose work was the to make sure like the gameplay and the combat areas remain still the same as they were in the original game.
Mm-hmm.
um but that was pretty much it, and then on top of that we are just like remaking a lot of the asset textures, all the characters, animations, everything was remade from scratch,
That's cool. Like
all the
hand.
lighting. It was a really good experience.
That sounds awesome. Did you hand paint the textures, or were there a lot of photo texture
um
assets?
no, back then so before, when I was working on Castlevania, it was all Photoshop back in the day. It was like
Mm-hmm.
all photo sourcing, and it was it was interesting to do it that way because like there was no tools at all,
Mm-hmm.
and then Naughty Dog started like doing sculpt approach,
Mm-hmm.
and I remember like watching a bunch of tutorials. I think it was for Uncharted 3 workflows that they were using ZBrush, and they were using like the tiling options in ZBrush.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided to try to use some of those workflows where it's sculpting everything and then adding on top what I already knew about Photoshop.
Yeah.
So try to combine like a little bit of both worlds to get like the detail right.
Like a high poly to low poly baking situation.
Yes,
Okay.
which is a method that I still use to till today.
Mm-hmm.
Really, I try to. I know there's a lot of people who say like, "Oh yeah, we have to be super careful about like time we spend on stuff." I think, or I try to think to myself that if I model everything and I'm fast enough,
Mm-hmm.
then I can reuse everything.
Yeah. The right is yours to use it.
Exactly. And also like because when you sculpt or model everything, you can work on top of like every single mask that you have from that. And I think for texturing especially, like that's a really good thing to have.
Mm-hmm.
um, so as a general rule, I always try to mold everything or sculpt everything. I don't have too much procedural workflows in my pipeline apart from generators that I try to incorporate into Painter maybe,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't do like fully procedural. I'm more of the thought that like combining is the best of all methods.
Yeah.
And in that regard, like I do incorporate a lot of photogrammetry as basis, for example. I think like when you're trying to measure exactly what you're doing in the times that you're doing, you have to be super optimal. So like sculpting, for example, it's good for like doing like the big details and the medium details,
Hmm.
but don't end up like sculpting peoples. I don't recommend that to
Yeah.
anyone. It's a waste of time.
Of course.
Yeah.
There's
Uh,
yeah, there's so too many details.
you can add a lot of those details using photogrammetry normal detail,
Hmm.
and it will look pretty much the same if you sculpt it yourself.
Yeah.
Um, so like the combination of methods or like procedurals. Procedurals are really good if you want to incorporate like certain details in normals or like in the roughness or whatever, and you can easily incorporate that and reuse it. Because again, like people who come in directly from procedurals tend to say like all the time that like it's very reusable, but everything that you do in a way is reusable.
Yeah.
A sculpt is reusable, a model is reusable, a smart material is reusable, everything is reusable if you think about it.
Hmm. Yeah,
So
I always remember watching the I don't know if you did this, but I used to watch the special features for all the Pixar films back in the day,
yeah.
on the DVD extra features or whatever. And I remember one from The Incredibles where Brad Bird, I believe the director, said like his mantra was we use every part of the buffalo, and it was kind of their theme of not wasting any work.
Yeah, that's why I end up like that's the other thing right now. Like sometimes people think like, oh, how can I cut time? And for like cutting time of doing stuff that is repetitive or like that is a workflow that you establish for yourself, you actually have to put some time in order to define that workflow a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, for example, what I do use quite a lot is like I do my own brushes for everything. I do my own brushes for like sculpting, and
Mm-hmm.
I also do my own brushes for like texturing. I have like over the years I put together like a collection of alphas that I still use. It's
Yeah.
available on my Gumroad, and I think it's super useful because like I know exactly how to use them, and I just jump in and just like paint a little bit and get the results that I want, like
Yeah.
to look good. But you actually have to put the time to develop the workflow and the way you do things.
Yeah.
People think this is some sort of magic or something, but
No.
it's one thing is to watch a tutorial, but like how people do these or that, and the other one is like learning that process through the process, which is
Right.
I think super important.
Yeah, I try to learn things myself and be able to replicate, or at least like internalize the information and then redo it myself without any influence, and build my own understanding of how that stuff works.
Yeah, no, it is important to go through the process yourself, because if not, watching tutorials is not learning in a way. You learn from what you do, and especially
Hmm.
from failing most of the times.
Yeah.
In that way, and this is kind of like what led us to record this podcast. It was about failing, right? Failing
Right.
fast,
Yeah.
because this moves me a little bit forward on my career.
Yeah.
After Splash Damage, I moved to Sweden to work at Machine Games, which was a studio that I personally love so much because they did the reboot of Wolfenstein,
Yeah.
the New Order, and I love that game so much. I still remember playing that game back in Madrid, thinking like, wow, this game is like out of this world when it comes to the quality of the narrative and the environment and the fantasy of it. The fiction was
It's
so good.
perfect. It's so good.
Yeah. So I end up going to Sweden because like the friend that I was talking about, Miles, that I was doing games with, we
Right.
were working together back at Splash Damage. So he ended up like leaving to go to Sweden. And I was like, where are you going? It's like Machine Games. I was like, man, you know, I wish I would be there. So he ended up
Yeah.
visiting back. And he was like, hey, we're looking for people. Will you consider like moving to Sweden and coming to work in Machine Games? There might be a chance.
Yeah.
And I was like, absolutely, let's go. So I end up like getting getting to Sweden, where I live like for 8 years.
Oh
And when
wow.
I moved to Sweden, It was 2016 now.
Okay.
So it was when Modo was like, peaking to be like that software that was the most efficient, the most fast. Tor Freak did a really good job there in order to like showcase a way of working and a way of like being efficient. So I got
That's
to learn Modo. Sorry, you were
is
saying
that's a Foundry software?
it was a Foundry software.
Okay, yeah.
And
I don't think I ever used it, but I remember seeing it. But yeah, carry
for
on.
for
Sorry.
for context, people who don't know about these, last year they announced like the software is not going to get more development at all.
Yeah.
So it's kind of dead at this point. They provided like with some licenses for like 10-year or life license or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
but they're not going to keep supporting it or anything. So it's practically abandoned in a way,
Man.
but at the same time it's still there working perfectly, doing
Right.
the same things that any other 3D software does.
It's,
But at that
it's
time it was like kind of like the popular time of Modo. So
mm-hmm.
I jumped at machine games into Modo because like everybody was using it, and soon I realized like that software is all about like being, first of all, like everything is hotkeys.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to be extremely efficient when it comes to like configure like a way of thinking between your brain and your muscle memory.
Mm-hmm.
So everything is like, I don't even think when I'm doing something in that software. I just press
Yeah, you
keys.
just do it.
You react to it basically.
Mm-hmm.
And then because the nature of the software itself is a very destructive software, it has
Mm-hmm.
some stock modifiers that were added over time, but the principle is like you model everything very fast because like the software is made for modeling fast,
Mm-hmm.
and then is a destructive workflow, and that destructive workflow always like kind of like force you to like get like a very quick mental effort of like, oh yeah, I know what I'm doing because i'm
Yeah.
i'm gonna try to do it only once,
Yeah.
and if you fail you do it again,
Yeah.
but you have learned something from that experience. And I think that's crucial in order to like understand, for example, like the games that we were doing there and the levels of efficiency that I think like machine games still does have.
Mm-hmm.
It's all due to that philosophy of like, oh yeah, we do games in a very fashion way because we know what we're doing. We know how we modeling the stuff, and there's only one way to do it. Is like do
Yeah.
it.
You just
you
go
know?
through it.
Yeah, yeah.
I think Blender is sort of similar to that. I don't know if you've had any experience using Blender, but that's my tool of choice in 3D because it's free and it's also a great software now. They've pushed it really far since the days that I started to learn it. Um, it's much more kind of in line with the user interface feels a little bit more contemporary and more like other mainstream softwares, but I there's a big emphasis on key commands and hotkeys, and you could
Radio
use
menus.
yeah you can use gizmos to move things around if you want, but there's also key commands that do pretty much everything. But
Yeah,
yeah.
Blender feels right now like the the favorite child of 3D.
Hmm. Yeah.
It used to be 3D Code. Well, it used to be Max, Maya, 3D Code, Modo, and now it seems like Blender is the thing, and I fully understand it. I have used it a little bit and I tried it, and
Hmm.
so far, like I don't feel like I need to actually switch the software because of like license or anything like that.
Yeah.
But I think definitely Blender is walking into the right direction to become, like what's been a meme for a very long time and an
Hmm.
industry standard. There's nothing that software cannot do.
I've actually seen like AAA game studios job postings that say like experience in Blender is like preferred. So it's being uh, used a lot, I think, in the industry.
It is.
So,
It is. I mean, it's used everywhere. Like I think like when Blender users or some Blender users, especially students, think like, oh yeah, I'm using Blender because it's free. I mean, don't fool yourself. I think Blender is used in every single studio right now,
Mm-hmm.
to a degree or another. Like the only reason why like we're still using certain like software is because of exporters,
Right.
and because of like some of the studios are like transitioning slowly. You know,
Mm-hmm.
um, I know for sure like now Machine Games and id Software are transitioning both to Blender,
Okay.
since Modo is dead, and so many other studios are doing the same.
That's cool.
I think Blender is the future.
Yeah.
I wish some of the principles behind the usability were different, because I appreciate the principles behind Modo, for example,
Mm-hmm.
and I wish everything wasn't about plugins, and have like a completely custom configuration, that varies so much the experience of the user at the end.
Yeah, like no two people have the same version. In a visual effects scenario, I've encountered these pipelines that are built around certain packages of software that are like even probably 5 or 10 years old, but they don't move on because it's just all so integrated into this pipeline. So I can see why like some places may not want to make that transition to another software just because everything is so integrated. But yeah.
I fully see that. I understand like developing pipelines, it's quite complicated and it takes a lot of time. So it's the same with game engines. Once you have developed it, you have developed like a certain number of tools over the time. You want to make sure that that investment goes somewhere, and sometimes what that means in games is like you have to use the same engine for a couple of games at least
Yeah.
before you add any of the new features, or before like, I don't know, thinking about like the how lighting has changed over the last years,
Mm-hmm.
how everything was baked before, and now everything is moving more towards like GI RTX and like Lumen solutions, like
Mm-hmm.
all that stuff. But yeah, it takes time to develop. It's not easy, especially if you do it in house. I think it's quite an effort nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes, like, I think that's the best way to do things.
Yeah. Um, you can, yeah, carry on. I didn't mean to cut you off again.
I know that's not good, but yeah, basically that led me to work there at Machine Games for like 8 years, um, and I'm working on a couple of Wolfenstein 2, and Youngblood, and also allowed me to work on a little bit of Indiana Jones 2 and other projects. When I joined, it was part of Bethesda, which is
Mm-hmm.
it was a very good group to work for, because I always thought that everybody there did an amazing job, like leading a company
Mm-hmm.
into a direction of like developing games that felt quite unique.
Yeah.
You can really tell like Bethesda, like heads were like people who came from actually game development, so
Yeah.
they really understand studios. They really understood the studios in a way, to make them do what they were best at. And when you see the overall portfolio of Bethesda, I think it's honestly amazing. Like the
Of course.
variety and the interesting stuff that a lot of the studios are still doing actually. And then that led me, after 8 years over there, to look for like new opportunities and like try to, because we were living in Sweden. I had already 2 kids, and we were thinking like, like we could do another move somewhere else, try something completely different from Europe. Moving to the US was like something that we always thought it would be interesting and nice.
Mm-hmm.
And I move over here to Washington State now, where I live, to work for Valve, where I work currently, and it's a studio that, of course, I always wanted to work since I was a teenager.
Yeah.
So here we
That's
are.
very cool. Very cool. Um, so I'm assuming you are probably the one that's like approving all of the Steam games, right?
No, no. We have a Steam permit for that.
Yeah, I'm joking. Um, well, I know I told you, uh, previously that I was just wanted to gush about Wolfenstein. I don't
Hmm.
have much to say specifically, but I just love that game. It's honestly like the game itself is fun as hell. It's got everything I love. It's got great art. It's got stealth. Um, it's just it's got great storytelling. I couldn't believe how good the cutscenes are in that game or those games. Like I felt like I was watching a movie at some points. Just the way that the story kind of unfolds and like the lighting in those cutscenes is so I don't know. I don't know how they do it. It's just it looks amazing.
I don't think there's any secrets.
Yeah,
Just doing them.
it's just good work.
Yeah,
Uh,
no, I share your love for the franchise and for the way that the studio developed the game, because I think there's still like a lot of super interesting people working over there. Um, it, there was definitely vision
mhm.
for Wolfenstein, and it's interesting how it has been developed over the years, and how like it capitalized on like certain things that I don't think a lot of games are doing. Um, to me, it's all about like the storytelling that they have, which is a little bit bonkers. It's almost like Tarantino in a way,
Yeah,
where you have like these super nice settings. The fiction of it is amazing, but then the character development and like how you know
yeah.
it's it's
It's
it's unique.
ridiculous. It's like ridiculous, but it's also very heartfelt at the same time. It's like
Yeah,
it's got some kind of weird hybrid of just like super bombastic, crazy, ridiculous violence that's mixed with this like very earnest and like I don't know, sentimental stuff that's beautiful. I love it.
You don't know that. What, you can see the future now? Don't act like you know things you can't possibly know.
yeah. I think it managed very well to do that thing where like some cutscenes you laugh, some cutscenes you're like super tense, some of the cutscenes you're like, wow, I like you feel for the characters.
Mm-hmm.
It's I don't know. There's definitely something about it that like that was the reason why I moved to that studio.
Yeah,
And
it's
then
cool.
I learned, of course, like who was behind it, and then I understood that it's the people who were doing Back at the Starbreeze, Chronicles of the Riddick,
Mm-hmm.
Escape from Butcher Bay, for example, which is a game that I remember playing back in the day. It was just like the way that the story will drive you through the game, and it had a lot of stealth.
Mm-hmm.
Because most of the times in that game, you're just like with your goggles on,
Mm-hmm.
to be able to see in the darkness,
Right.
and you have like a screwdriver, and that's about it.
I
You
love
trying
that
to escape prisons, and then
rusty knife.
because it will take you to the prison, you have to escape, and then you will get captured again, and then you go back to the prison. It was interesting. It was really really interesting.
That sounds like my jam.
Yeah, yeah.
You mentioned too that you did get a chance to contribute to a little bit of the Indiana Jones, the new, it's the Great Circle, right?
Yeah, yeah, I got to work a little bit on it. Um, Over the years I was there, I started like a senior environment artist, and then I got promoted, and I ended up like being lead artist,
Oh, cool.
and so it's mostly supervising, but also like doing some field work,
Mm-hmm.
because I just don't like just being away from what I like doing every day.
Mm-hmm.
So this complicated a little bit my situation in terms of like being more effective and doing more actual work itself. But my work was like doing some of the stuff. So I got moved from another project to get to work on that, because the other lead artist was on parental leave,
Mm-hmm.
and I got to work like for a year on the project, mostly doing layout explorations, blockouts, for like different maps.
Mm-hmm.
I got to work, for example, on Giza, like a little bit of the village that you go to, for like some stuff in the jungle of Sukhothai,
Cool.
um, wherever it was needed, really, because like my job wasn't actually to work so much in the game, but like to make sure that the game was being made in a way.
Right.
But
Yeah.
it was a good experience. I left like a year before it got shipped, and for once, you know, because like through all these years, like I work on the games and the game get released, and I played it as I am still working over there.
Hmm.
This time around was different because like um, I keep hearing about like how they were finishing the game, and of course, like finishing game is a very hard thing to do.
Hmm.
But I got to experience the game as a player for once in my life.
Oh, cool.
So it was great, like over the Christmas, to play the game and feel it without like having too much attachment to it in a way.
Yeah.
So I wasn't very biased about like how the game. So I just played it and really enjoyed it. I
Yeah.
think it
I
is not a perfect game, but it has a lot of things that make me realize that it has like a lot of good values. Again, like for me, like the three pillars that like usually games sit on is narrative, gameplay, and art, right?
hmm
And machine games definitely does really good narrative. Does an amazing job when it comes to art, and you know the gameplay is here and there depending on the game. Sometimes they
Yeah.
nail it. Some of the times it's a little bit more loose.
hmm
I think Indiana Jones is like kind of works in a way.
Yeah.
Um,
It gives you an
but
excuse to walk around these gorgeous environments.
exactly,
That's
you
all
know,
I care about.
it's funny that you're saying this because while working on Wolfenstein, we always had this thing where like we put so much effort into making the world itself, right?
Uh-huh.
And like extreme care for every single detail. And then game gets released, you go and watch it on YouTube, and then that corridor you've been working for the last 3 weeks, a guy just shoot through and runs in like
Yeah.
3 seconds, and it
Uh-huh.
doesn't even look around, you know.
Yeah.
So in a way, Indiana Jones was a perfect excuse, as you said, like for like actually taking the time and exploring the world and like you know living in that world.
Yeah.
I thought it was great. Do you play
I
it?
I'm playing it now. I actually got it
All
for
right.
Father's Day, and my younger brother is in town from Mexico right now visiting. One of the games we grew up playing together was Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade on PC. So we've been like last night and the night before, we after everybody goes to bed, we turn on the TV and turn on Indiana Jones, and we kind of pass the controller. So that's I haven't had that opportunity in years. So it's really cool to get to do that with an Indiana Jones game. I love it. It's great.
Yeah. I think it has like a good combination of the technology did evolve. It tech
Hmm.
kind of evolved very well, especially lighting wise, and then the art, it's really well made too.
Hmm.
So everything kind of marriages together in a perfect combination of. I don't know. I just really think it works super nicely.
Yeah. I'm just curious about like size relationships between things, and like if the level designer created some space that's like maybe doesn't necessarily correlate to the the metrics that you have in your assets, or in your if you've created like a modular kit, or like this distance means that it needs to be this certain piece, or you know what's the back and forth like, I guess, with art and
Mhm.
level design, and if you could just talk about that a little bit.
So I've been in the position of just doing art, and I've been in the position of like being able to do the whole process from the beginning, including the level design of whatever we were working on. um, there was a bunch of levels of Wolfenstein that we did all the level design ourselves, so in a way it was very easy for us to approach the whole process in a very holistic way, where you think from the top to the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first thing I would recommend to people, is like make sure that first of all you understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. Depending on the type of game you're working on, it's not the same to work on a competitive shooter multiplayer game that to work on single player game when it comes to approaching the level design, right?
Mm-hmm.
And probably approaching the art neither. But I think it's very very important to have in mind that level design can be approached into different ways. There's an old very traditional way that is very abstract where like people just block out stuff with like basic geometry
Mm-hmm.
and that's about it. I think there's another way of doing that, which is like modeling the level design itself,
Mm-hmm.
because you can do so many things and you can represent spaces in a more interesting way while still finding like visual solutions for that kind of problems, right? And always having in mind the composition and like how to guide the player through the level in a way. So uh, I would say like I've never been afraid, like that moment of oh shit. Like I remember like when I joined machine games, I had no clue. I never done like level design at all.
Mm-hmm.
And my first task was like to read a document where like the story was told and where like the ingredients were put into the table of like oh you need to do this, do that, and then you actually have to represent it. So I always try to start like with very very basic geometry, like
Mm-hmm.
nothing you know overwhelming, like something that is just like planes, cubes, and stuff like that to make sure like um, like the metrics are good in terms of like the scales
Mm-hmm.
and in the way that they don't interfere with the metrics from the game itself.
Mm-hmm.
And then I guess in some people's mind they think this process is very chaotic and have no order at all. I think it's really good, and I learned through the years that if you had a process of how to do these in steps, it makes everything way more enjoyable and easy as well. So what I will do in terms of process, in terms of steps, is just like first of all I do what I call a block out,
Mm-hmm.
which is like again define the path of the player if it's a single player game. Try to make sure that you establish the landmarks, put everything in the way, and guide the player through the visual language that you have, even if it's very limited at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
But in that way you can start like checking the timings of like the areas that you need to go, what you need to do, events that is going to happen, combat arenas, and all that stuff. um, and then once you have that more or less nail, which it doesn't mean like you're going to actually be uh, purely executing that as a whole. Like there might be changes later that you have to address, but you can definitely move to like do a block out that is a little more, um, you know, defined in a
Defined.
way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in that block out, define what I try to do is like try to work with like meshes that are unique to get ideas, to
Mm-hmm.
get the process of like what kind of, I don't know, like it sounds silly, but like the angles that are you using, the proportions, like
Mm-hmm.
how, what is the height of a building, what is, all that kind of stuff that is going to define visually the thing that you're making.
How closely to reality do you stay with some of that stuff? Like, do you exaggerate a
I
good
think you need
bit?
to exaggerate a lot, yeah.
Okay.
Like usually I try to exaggerate as much as possible because I don't think, I mean, at least in my perspective, we're not doing like a flight simulator most of the times.
Mm-hmm.
99% of the games are not flight simulator or like Formula One simulators.
Yeah.
You want like an experience at the end of the day, right? Something that is compelling, something that you play through and you get like amazed by it, like by its visuals, by like
Mm-hmm.
the pace of it. So I try to exaggerate and make sure that like scale, perspective, and everything else work in my favor rather than like being a limitation.
Mm-hmm.
And once you are able to explore the block out in a more refined way, you can actually like start thinking about like how you're gonna break down the shapes into like medium and small, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you start to get some metrics. So after that, you can, I like to call it architectural paths where like you try to define what the modularity of the stuff is going to be
Hmm.
and how the scales are going to be break down into like different scales, right? You're going to have like, I don't know, if we're talking about buildings, you can probably break it by floors, and then of
Hmm.
course you're going to have like the windows and the doors and all that stuff. If it's something a little bit more complex like a flying fortress, well, it's going to be something else, right?
Right.
But you can start like prototyping and trying to understand more in detail like the shape language of what you're doing, so you can design. I like to design everything on the fly.
Hmm.
So try to bring all those elements in a very primitive way,
Yeah.
and then do a couple of tests with different ideas and different iterations of those. And then once you have it, you can define the modularity. And once you have defined the modularity of the whole thing, you can replace it and like start like getting that block out into
Hmm.
like a more definitive stage. I also like to not to use materials at all during those phases, because I think like when it comes to composition, the two elements that I like to use is usually like a little bit of lighting, um, not too conclusive, like not too defined or locked,
Hmm.
because at the end you just like hinting what it could be, not
Yeah.
what it will end up being. um, but also volumes and composition, right? if you start if you start like adding materials way too early, what happens is like it creates a visual noise that it kind of like doesn't respect the hierarchy. And I think in that hierarchy what comes first is like the composition of the shapes.
Hmm.
If you had like good composition of the shapes with a few solid colors, then you have already like a good baseline.
Yeah.
And then once you have those elements in, everything is modularized, you have a little bit of the composition done with all the previous steps. That's when I would say like, yeah, just jump now into actually doing everything that is more related, and especially
Hmm.
like all the modularity in detail and all the materials in detail. That's when
Yeah.
you can actually start like thinking about like how you're going to break down things in order to make it feel like it's all different, when in reality it's like using like maybe 3 4 materials, right?
Right.
Or like how many pieces are you going to be using, like mm, some custom normals with like, like nothing super complicated like mid polys, and
Hmm.
how for example you can incorporate like things that break the modularity that like are maybe more bespoke,
Hmm.
but it helps you a lot to actually do a good job in the overall composition. I think the process is all about like making sure that you sell the big picture, and then you sell the illusion of like everything's unique, when in reality everything is like a continuation of like modules, right?
Yeah. I've noticed that like I've developed a fondness in certain games where I recognize repeated props or things like that, and I kind of like I develop a relationship with that prop. I'm like, oh hey, that's that ashtray again. I remember that. That's the ashtray from Dishonored. I love that ashtray. It's
Yeah.
like
Sonora
uh
is a really good example. It's a really good and a really bad example, because like I could take that set dressing forever, in the sense that like every single prop in that game is so good
oh yeah.
that it's like I don't mind the repetition here. Please do more of it. I want to
Yeah.
see that
I
asset
just
again.
want to look at it again.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
That's one of the games that I've done that kind of I've gone through and taken out all the enemies in a level, and I'll just walk around and analyze everything, and I've actually like taken some of the spaces and rebuilt them based on
Yeah.
like trying to calculate sizes of things by eye, and I think I've gotten pretty close. Um, but it's really fun to study what other games have done and like try to find where the pieces are broken and like where they come together.
Dishonored is one of my favorite games when it comes to the art of it and
Hmm.
the world storytelling. Um, I'm a huge fan. I've always been a huge fan since the first one came out,
Yeah,
and then I had the luxury to get to work with Arcane on some stuff.
for
Uh,
Youngblood.
yeah, for Youngblood. Um, And even for Wolf 2, they actually came over to
Oh, I
help on
didn't
that too.
realize that.
Yeah. But I got the chance to actually go to Arcane to try to understand a little bit better, like how they operate and the way they work.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty nice, like to see like how much care and love they have for like the craft and for
Mm-hmm.
making games that feel genuine and interesting and unique, because like Arcane is still doing like very very unique things.
Oh yeah, they're easily either my favorite or after maybe FromSoft or something like that. Um, Probably my
Yeah, they do
favorite studio. But
they do some really good job at FromSoft too. I think the last step on this process maybe is like set dressing, since you mentioned it, right?
hmm
Which is, you know, once the modularity and like a little bit of the base paths of materials and stuff, it's like, how do I break the modularity? You can break it with modularity, paradoxically,
hmm
but set dressing, I think, is crucial. Um, when it comes to, like, for example, decals, like the use
yeah,
of decals, the use of like small little things that change completely, like the storytelling of a room, or like the use of lighting. I think, because like same tunnel, the same metal corridor could look completely different with completely different lighting conditions, right? So I think it is that moment where like you have to just, step away a little bit and think like, what kind of like, again, talking about efficiency, right? Like, what can I do with the minimal effort to turn this corner here into something completely that than that one over there, right?
hmm
And sometimes it's like tinting materials.
yeah,
Sometimes it's like a bunch of graffiti. Sometimes it's like uh, a bunch of assets that you put on top of everything that
hmm
kind of matches the modules. Like that. That is something, for example, with mechanical stuff. I spent quite a bunch of days, I would say weeks, just placing pipes in games.
yeah,
And it's one of the most satisfying things to do, because like with pipes, if you have the freedom, you have the art direction to that allows that kind of like, oh, I can do a lot here.
hmm
You can place them in a nice way that you can change completely compositions in a like in a scene. So
yeah. I like to think about like adding lots of simple shapes to make something that's like compelling. I think it goes a long way.
yeah, I think going back to the modules, um that's the other thing, like when it comes to visually treat like the space in between the elements, for example, like the angles of something,
hmm
that there's simple choices, like like having a 45-degree angle on a corridor, or like having a different angle, or like rounding the corners of something, like I like to approach the environment art in general in a very simplistic way, where detail gets added over time rather
hmm
than too early. Because if you add detail too early, first of all, I think you're failing the whole process of game developing,
hmm
because you're not able to fix any issues. I think like adding too much detail at the beginning of something, it goes against gameplay most of the times, right?
Yeah.
Um, and also because like I think when you have like this more additive process that is control, you can actually understand what is right and what is wrong. If you have like something that is cluttered from the beginning,
hmm
you're never going to see what's going on with the final image, or what is going on when you progress through somewhere, right?
Yeah.
You're only going to see like, oh, there's a lot of stuff, but I don't fully understand what is working and what is not. So like small step in that process, I think it really really helps.
Yeah. I took a advanced drawing class in college, and I remember just like the emphasis on working on the entire composition, like at once, rather than going in and defining certain specific areas. Like I know my professor used to always, um, you know, they don't want you to work on just the face all at one time and define the complete, you know,
Yeah.
shape of the face, but rather like, and I brought that like I brought that thinking into everything I do. I try to think about things as the entire piece, and kind of like bounce around and fill in certain gaps, and um, develop the entire package at once and bring it all up, kind of like in conjunction with each other.
I think there's a complementary thing there as well. That is, when you're working on let's say a level or a map or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and you do it through steps, um, there is a very nice feeling of like progression. You know,
Mm-hmm.
when you see like, okay, we have a very basic geometry, but we have defined exactly what, the track or like the path of the player is going to be. So we have success in a way. We
Mm-hmm.
understood like the needs on that step, and we did it in a successful way, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you go, you add an extra one, and it's like, whoa, the space is starting to look interesting in a very basic shape,
Mm-hmm.
but I still can see, squeeze my eye, like what is going to be at the end, right?
Yeah.
And then the same with like adding a few materials or like a few lights. There's something rewarding in like following a process
Mm-hmm.
that makes you feel like you're gonna get to the final destination, right?
Yeah.
You are not like trying to run through the whole thing to get to the destination fast. Sometimes you actually have to do that, but there's other ways to do that, I think.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to execution, for example, when it comes to like doing levels, there's a huge difference between like working on a level at the beginning of the development of a game and working on a different level at the end of the game, you know,
Yeah.
because you know exactly that you have no time. So
Mm-hmm.
it's, I usually try to do is like put all the effort at the beginning, like all the like model everything, sculpting everything, do all the textures, do everything that I can
Mm-hmm.
in order to try to make something unique. So later on, like when I have no time anymore, I can reuse a lot of that stuff
Yeah.
in the smartest way possible in order to like shape like a level into something differently.
That's cool.
Um, so I don't know. There's a lot of shortcuts, but definitely I don't think approaching composition like lettering is one of those. Um, I think you have to be very thoughtful and like and define yourself the steps in order to get there.
Yeah. That's awesome. Um, what do you think stands to be lost by excuse me, by automating some of that stuff? Like, um,
Automating as in procedural workflows.
procedural or like generated assets. I don't know if anybody in AAA is like going that route, but I assume that it's probably going to start making its way into some pipelines. But like,
Yeah, I think, I don't know. I think accelerating process is fine as long as you have the time to think about the overall picture, right? I think there's already a lot of um, parts of the process that been accelerated in a way. I think photogrammetry is a good example of that.
right.
You know, I understand someone might have, might find joy in actually doing like a third texture,
Mm-hmm.
but when you have like 20 in your life, when you have done like 80 in your life,
Mm-hmm.
there's no more joy about that. Especially knowing that you cannot compete against like a really good photogrammetry third texture,
Yeah.
and there's no point either in doing it, because like what you're doing is like you're not saving any time for like the important stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I think the time should be saved for like the important decision making rather than like for individual bits that don't matter too much. That
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean you cannot enjoy still to do some things by hand. I do a lot of stuff by hand, but I try to be as pragmatic and practical as possible. That's why I
Mm-hmm.
think like the use of photogrammetry is a really good thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same with like people who approach it from the Houdini side, where like they automate certain parts of the process where like edge damaging or stuff like that, they just run it through Houdini and just like have a base already ready to be sculpted. And I think it's a very valid process too. I don't find myself in that situation because like I've done the process so many times that like for me it doesn't take that long. I know exactly where I got stuck in the past, so I know how to prevent that to happen again.
Right.
Because I always try to put like the visual quality before like uh, anything else apart from the efficiency, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think like there's like a line where you can actually be efficient and fulfill like a good visual quality, fidelity, or whatever.
Yeah.
So I think like automating some part of the process are good. Like I've seen like a lot of the generative 3D meshes. I don't think right now like a lot of that is very usable
Mm-hmm.
currently, and I think it's gonna come with other problems from a legal perspective, and also from like usability and like how you cannot reuse a lot of that stuff. I think for like prototyping or like visual exploration, it could be useful
Mm-hmm.
quite a lot. But I also think like if you have been building your library of stuff, like to put example of these, like I only model bolts once in my life, right? And
Yeah.
it's just like I wanted to model the bolts the way I wanted to make them right and use it for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
So I have a bolt scene where like every time I work into something, it's just like, okay, I'll bring the bolts and start placing the bolts.
Yeah.
So I'm not wasting time there. I'm
Yeah.
reusing the
Bolts
stuff.
never change.
Bolts never change. This is the slogan for Fallout 5.
Yeah.
So
Uh,
like, and it's the same nowadays with like we have a lot of asset libraries. A lot of studios are doing libraries. Outsourcing is the other part of like speeding the process.
yeah.
I think outsourcing is the part where like you speed the process. Obviously, you cannot do everything. Although I've been in studios where we have done pretty much everything that is in
Mm-hmm.
the game. Um, Automating the process also, as we were talking before, is automating the way that you work to be more efficient.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to say, oh yeah, the problem is like if I don't automate the process, I'm gonna be slower. When then it's the decision maker that is making you slower. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean?
Yeah.
A lot of the times people think that making the art of the game it's super slow. But I like to give you an example, Youngblood, which is not a very long game, but like definitely have a lot of love into the environments.
Mm-hmm.
All the art of that game was done in 9 months.
What?
So it's definitely possible to do it if you're into the right mentality. We try to be as efficient as possible back then, and that is something that I really learned, you know, and I still use it nowadays. Like, how can I be super efficient without like giving up on like the visual fidelity of what I'm doing?
Yeah.
um because again, like I've seen like a lot of studios that get trapped into this cycle of like decision making, and the inefficiency is not in the execution, it's in the decision making.
Yeah.
Someone decides that we're going to do these, and then everybody executes, and then they go back and it's like, no, we're going to do this other thing instead, and then you have to redo the whole thing, right?
Yeah. I
So
I'm very familiar with that.
yeah, a lot of a lot of studios are like that. It's yeah, I've been lucky in that regard because the practicality of some places is very nice and very appreciated.
Yeah.
But yeah, like it's about like see where your efficiency is, and to touch on the last bit that I was saying there, like outsourcing is it's a really good resource as well. It's
Yeah.
where like, okay, I don't have the time to do everything. So I can rely on an outsourcing studio to actually do the thing without like compromising the visual quality, right?
Yeah.
And
That's
you can always find like good outsourcing studios that work. It's a hard thing to make it work because a lot of outsourcing studios have different experiences working with different studios.
mm-hmm.
But and there's a lot of massage and a lot of like trying to incorporate them into your workflows and stuff. um, but it's I, I would say like the most important part of like having outsourcing working in your game is making sure that the people who work at the studio, the outsourcing studio, feel part of your team,
Mm-hmm.
because that's when, if you have that kind of like, especially like giving freedom, like making sure that if you work with a studio, for example, like a lot of outsourcing studios just like do props, but some studios actually start like to make levels, and if you incorporate those studios into your game and they able to do and deliver a couple of levels, you're going to be working with those studios for a very long time,
Oh yeah.
because that is a very rare thing to find.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I'm familiar with not outsourcing studios, but working with like freelancers and stuff. And I've um, definitely had that experience where I can't handle the workload and I need help.
yeah,
So it's good to have people to go to fill that. And
then managing that is another work, but
yeah.
let me see if I might actually have, so you get to understand like the level I'm talking about. This is a presentation I did a
Oh,
few years
cool.
ago now, and it's all about like how to build stuff. Um, a lot of considerations about like, yeah, this is basically like the process of building levels, the way I approach it and the way I've been working for a while. And again, like you can see here,
Mm-hmm.
what I was talking about before, like the block out and level design.
Yeah.
We're just like, yeah, just make sure that like you have the very basics, and then like make
Mm-hmm.
sure like the metrics work, and test and iterate,
Mm-hmm.
as if you will play that in the game.
Yeah.
And I show some examples here of the Ausmercer, which is like the
Yeah.
one of the levels for Wolfenstein, and this is actually the first task that I got to do in the game.
That's cool.
Um, so this is exactly how I block it out. It's super simple. I was just trying to define the path,
Mm-hmm.
and then a combat scripter was like adding like the enemies, and we were talking about like how we can make sure the flow for the combat is correct, like where the enemies are going to appear, like
Mm-hmm.
different type of enemies. And here's like comparison between like what is in the final game
Mm-hmm.
and what was like, you can see it's very
Yeah,
basic. It's extremely basic.
for
But
sure.
I think like it makes a lot of sense to work in this way, and this is all modular. That's why like I think like if you work super smartly with modules,
Uh-huh.
you can do quite a lot, because you can define the path of the layer like very easily. Same here. This is like this was like the final one,
Uh-huh.
and this was my original blockout, because I did the level design on this thing, and like you basically go, and then you have to go up to the top and go through like the control room up
Yeah.
to the
I
next
remember
level.
that level. And you have
But
those flying or big jumping mech things that come out.
yeah, exactly, at the final battle thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The sisters, yeah.
Yeah,
This
those
was done
things.
by some other people on my team, this area in particular. We called this the heavy metal concert.
Uh-huh.
So it was like literally like an Iron Maiden concert where like everything is like
Yeah.
rockets and fire and stuff. But again, this is the same. It's this was another good example of like there's like a part of the game where you have to go and like break some magnetic claws that is holding the submarine. And at the beginning, it's just like, yeah, I'm gonna take it easy and do like something simple, you know.
Mm-hmm.
This was the idea, and then it got more complicated. But everything can be uh, fairly easy. Like this is a little bit of illustrative for the process that I was mentioning before. Like
Mm-hmm.
where like after that blockout, I knew exactly what was working and what wasn't,
Mm-hmm.
and then I could add like the modularity. I could block out the elements. Um, and again, there's nothing exciting about like the final quality of these, but you can already start seeing like how the elements get together and like
Oh
how
yeah.
it will work. Um,
How
I
do
think I,
you think about like when are you trying to think about what that would actually look like in on the ship itself, or is this just like I don't need to know how the silhouette of the ship would look at this point. This is just a
w-
cool play space.
we had a overall concept of like how it would look, the exterior of the ship. So we're
Hmm.
trying to place it in areas that we thought it would be interesting and it will fit like mechanically and
Yeah.
like context wise. Um, but everything was like that. It's like these were
Hmm.
taken by this like there are naval like boat kind of cannons,
Hmm.
like anti-aircraft guns.
Yeah.
Um, I think I have. Yeah, yeah. This is the
Hell
actually
yeah.
this is the slide that I wanted to show you because again, what I did there was like try to define very basic stuff. Where like, oh yeah, those are going to be the walls. These are going to be the windows. I didn't end up using all of them, and these are going to be the doors. And being able to design from a very very basic perspective, where like
Hmm.
I was just trying like shape explorations, where like this was more like leading into the Zeppelin like shape language.
Hmm.
This was more like more mechanical and like airlifty,
Yeah.
and then tried to combine like different ideas there, or like
Hmm.
more the aeronautical kind of beams where they're very light, have like a lot of hollow spaces.
Hmm.
Um, and again, there's nothing exciting about these, but you can see if you start from basic stuff, you can see how you can add, you know, a little bit more of complexity here and there. And then I
Yeah.
end up like getting these, and this was my whole module set for like all that walkway.
So that's the repeating shape, that whole
Yeah,
bunch.
that was it with like a couple of corners, and that was it. And then once I knew about that, then I started like actually modeling, you know,
Hmm.
all the elements to make sure that all this stuff, well, in this case it was like it didn't have an even geometry. This was all flat.
Just trim sheets or something.
Yeah, these are trim sheets that then, you know, like it will make the turns, and
Hmm.
um, adding some extra elements, everything kind of got combined into something that the shape is exactly what I wanted.
Hmm.
Then it has like detail where I wanted to, but it's all modular. You can see it here. You can
Oh
see here
yeah.
like how every module it's separated
Hmm.
in order to work with each other, and it kind of works. And this is like mostly about like when do modularity and when not, right? And the things that are important in my opinion, which is like make sure that you work in an engine that is instancing things, so you don't pay the extra cost of like having multiple meshes. Uh,
Yeah.
when the repetitions justify, do mostly modularity for architectural stuff or mechanical stuff. Uh, work on the grid, which is really useful,
Oh yeah.
and try to make sets that are like complex but at the same time simple, so you don't end up like with a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Um, and what I said to you, the placement of the pivot to have like a criteria where like you establish it from the very beginning,
Hmm.
and then make sure as well that the naming convention works. So it's important that if you do like wall, you call it wall, and then you specify, for example, in the naming convention, like the length of it, and then you know what it is, like wall
Yeah.
straight, wall corner in, corner out, stuff like that. Yeah, because that's gonna help you so much.
Yeah. I've done some of that, but then I still just like I get really bogged down. I guess it's mostly when I'm trying to replicate stuff from a blueprint and I don't have a piece that will get me to this specific distance or something like that. And so I'm like then
But
I'm making like a 1 meter piece and then a 2 meter piece and then a I don't know, just maybe too many different.
I would say like usually the minimum that I work with in the past was like half meter. and
Mhm.
then from there like 1 meter, 2 meters, and 4 meters, and that's about it.
Yeah.
I don't think you need to go more crazy than that, because I've run a couple of times into go a little bit more granular,
Mhm.
and like anything under zero point 0.5 meters is uh I don't think it's a need, you know.
Yeah, just tack it on to the module or something and
This is another example of like this whole thing was all modularized from like different elements, and then like those, once you know, like once you put it together, that's what I was saying to you, that I think like if you have modules
yeah.
and you spend the time actually investing into building a module system that you can reuse,
Yeah.
especially with walls and architecture, it's a little bit more easy than designing mechanical elements, because like at
Yeah.
the end of the day, walls are walls and floors are floors, right?
Yeah.
But if you define them decently with like very basic shapes, and then you're able to work with those in the game, because these all screenshots are in game,
Mhm.
then you're gonna have that kind of like free way to actually be able to execute different ideas with one module. So you like being super efficient in that regard.
Yeah. And then I guess you could skin it different with different textures too, or like different variations on a trim sheet that could.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
This is like, I think this is more like this explaining the process of like how the individual beats were like break down into like different variations and different materials, and like how everything was modularized in order to like make variations of everything, right?
yeah.
um, so you can have like a lot of like the doors or the lights or um, yeah, this is more about like custom meshes, where and when to use like trim sheets,
Mhm.
how to do mirror geometries and things like that. But yeah, this is a very um, complete overall of, you know, like this is a little bit of what I was talking.
So not probably don't put that in then.
No. I don't mean it that way. No, you can feel free to use this
Okay.
as much as you want. I
Okay.
mean, like the whole process about like set dressing, architectural passes, blockouts, and stuff. This is pretty much what this covers. So
I would love to analyze all of that and try to like soak it into my brain.
yeah, yeah. Even if you don't end up using it in the video or in the podcast, like feel free
Yeah,
to browse it, because like I think there's took me a while to put all this stuff together. So I'll
it's
send you a
really
link.
cool. It's very cool. Um, Let me see. I think it's probably getting pretty long now. I think we covered most everything that I wanted to cover. Um, Sheesh. Yeah, it was very, very enjoyable conversation.
Sorry if I talk too much, man.
No, I love listening. I'm I mean the whole reason I got into game dev was from watching GDC videos and stuff, and I just soaked all that stuff up. Like I'm a sucker for getting into the details of like how stuff is done. So that's part of the reason why I wanted to do this, just because I wanted to, understand the process more. So, and I think a lot of other people probably do too. And I
Mm.
appreciate you being open to sharing that with me.
Well, I mean, I'm here for that, man.
Yeah.
Sharing is caring at the end of the day, and I think there's a lot of need to actually. There's a lot of things nowadays when it comes to sharing the knowledge that is behind a paywall,
Hmm.
and I really like the feeling of like the old days of Polycon, where like people were just like freely talking about it without like trying to get like any economical outcome of it. Um,
Yeah.
and what you just said about the podcast is like exactly the reason why we end up doing a podcast. And I know it might sound very selfish, but like part of like interviewing people, it's learning yourself about those people and like their experience and stuff, right? So when we started the podcast, a lot of people are like, "Hey, why don't you guys monetize this podcast?" It's like, because the economical outcome of this is not the important part. The
Yeah.
important part is like that we learn and we get to know different people that work in different studios with different mentalities and
Hmm.
tell us that experience, and we can learn from that. And of course, in that way, we are learning ourselves, and that's what we enjoy. It's just talking to others.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if someone else can hear that conversation, I think it's extremely valuable sometimes. So,
Yeah. Two things I want to ask you is what's the name of the indie game that you made that's on Steam?
oh
And
yeah,
what is the name of your podcast?
the podcast that we have,
Yeah,
it's in Spanish. That's the other thing.
that's okay.
So we talk in Spanish there.
That's all
Uh,
right.
so the name of the game, it's called Torpedo.
Torpedo.
Yes,
Okay.
it's on Steam. You can find it there. It's very silly,
That's quite all right. I'm
but, but
just
but it's
curious.
exactly it. Yeah. I send you a link on X.
Okay.
And then the name of the podcast is Studio Creaturas. Creaturas is like creature.
Hmm.
It's like a mix between like creature and creative,
I like that.
creation. So in Spanish, that makes sense. I
Yeah.
don't think it makes that much sense
No, I like
in
it. I don't know why, but I have a lot of trouble naming things, so I go round and round in my head about different names, and like it's nice to hear one that sticks and one that sounds relevant and makes sense in context with the subject of the podcast. So,
Mm.
um,
I think it's like with namings, like sometimes me individually or like as a group, we end up like picking stuff that either is silly and it ends up like having like some sort of character, like Torpedo.
mhm.
It's my inability of properly spell torpedo.
Okay.
So there was a Blizzard artist that his nickname on Polygon was Torpedo,
Okay.
and we're making a game about submarines with torpedoes. And I always thought like torpedo was spelled with a U instead of an O. And my friend, like he's actually from England. He found it so funny. It's like, yeah, let's fucking call it torpedo.
I like that. Torpedo.
Yeah, so it ended up being like that. And the name of the podcast come from like we were just fantasizing with the idea of like the four of us working together again, because people that once used to work together,
Uh-huh.
and it's also a way of like actually sitting together and talk about stuff. So we were like, hey, why don't we make this whole thing, this whole fantasy of like we have our own studio and we inviting people to come for the interview, and that is the
Yeah.
whole thing is like, yeah, welcome to our studio.
Yeah.
And
We're
we're like,
creatures.
ask it. Yeah. So it's just like, yeah, welcome to the studio. Like we can do some interview to you, so we can actually define if we will be interested in hiring you or not.
That's funny.
So, yeah.
Well, cool. Well, it's been very nice talking. If you would like to do it again sometime, I don't know if there's more detail that we can get into about anything, but I'd love to talk to you again at some point.
All right.
Um,
Maybe
so,
for the season 2.
yeah, yeah,
See how it goes.
yeah,
I hope you find like some other people who are willing to speak
yeah,
and share their stuff. 'Cause, I
yeah,
think it's always nice to hear other people.
yeah. I've had a few people agree to do it, but I haven't nailed down any dates yet. So thank you for being the first.
My pleasure, man. It's always nice to do things like this. So, and I know the feeling being behind a podcast.
Yeah.
So if someone is encouraged to actually do it, I can only tell you one thing: it's a lot of work. But
Ah, believe it. I
if you
imagine
take
so.
something out of it, then that's great.
Awesome. All right. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and bounce, but again, Ayi Sanchez. Andy Lemoyne. Good talk.
Thank you so much for having me, man.
All right.
Pleasure.
Appreciate it. See ya. Bye.
Bye.